Okay, guys, so we are going to go again with chapter 7.1, the end of World War II in Asia Pacific. And remember, you just need your handouts, make sure you have your writing materials, make sure you're ready to go. Okay, this means you need your 7 to 8 hours of sleep. That's how you will grow. Okay, and remember that you should have already read the textbook. Now, you don't have to read the textbook all at one shot. You can split it up into chapters. You can read what you're comfortable, then you listen to the lecture for that section. For example, for today, we're going to look at American military and economic might. So maybe you can just read that part of the textbook first. If you haven't done so, please stop, and read the textbook. Okay, it will really help you to consolidate better. Okay. So let's go. Remember key dates again. End of World War II in Asia Pacific. We are going from 1941 to 1945. Bonus points. Give yourself a bonus point. 7th December is the attack on Pearl Harbor, and 15th August is the day of the surrender. Remember, we're talking about Pacific Theater, so we have Japan and the USA. Okay, so let's go. Today, what will we be focusing on? We are focusing. Today we are focusing on this American might. Okay, we will mostly be talking about economic and military power. In terms of atomic bomb, we are leaving it for the last part of the chapter. So really, we are looking at why did the USA win a victory in the Pacific Theater. Okay, it's not going to be very long. So here, when we are talking about Japan's defeat in World War II, American might, we are looking at two basic things. Economic strength, we already know. We are talking about money. We are talking about resources. And more specifically, we are talking about wartime production. Okay, these should be familiar concepts. Okay, now military strength, we are talking about military victories. Okay, so we need to quote those specific military victories to show how the US, they won crucial battles. Okay, that turned the tide of the war. Okay, so without further ado, let's go in. We'll deal with economic strength first. Okay. Oh, I realized that this is wrong. Reasons for the end of World War II in Asia. Okay, so now, firstly, we must remember that the US of A, the United States of America, is the world's most powerful industrial nation. What does this mean? If I'm the world's most powerful industrial nation, it means that I have the greatest amount of production, which then translates into wartime production. What does this mean? It means that I can produce more raw material. I can produce more war material than anybody else. Okay, in a game of numbers, the USA is always going to win. Okay, and this is what we know as a logistical advantage. Okay, now you also see that on the notes here it says that they are protected on both sides by oceans. Now, why is this important? If we look at a map of the USA, I'm just going to draw it here. Let me try something. Okay. The world is roughly shaped like that. This is this is North America. Then there's a connection. We have South America. Okay. If you think about it, I just want to draw the American continent in the middle. Here we have Europe. Okay. Here we have Africa. Okay, here we have Australia, okay, and Asia basically is like this, right? What it means is that the US continent, sorry, North America, and this is South America, they are bounded, okay, on two sides. Down here we have the Atlantic Ocean, and down here we have the Pacific Ocean. Now, what this means is that it is literally impossible to fly across the Pacific or fly across the Atlantic to bomb US factories. Okay, which means that they are safe from enemies attacking their industrial base. What does this mean? It means that the US will never have to worry about people destroying their factories. Okay? So Napoleon Bonaparte, the famous French dictator slash general slash tyrant slash man who finally lost the war, okay, he says an army fights on its stomach, and this is very, very true. You can think about it. You can have all the bullets in the world, you have all the best training, every single thing. If you have no food, you can't fight. Very simple, because you just can't walk. Now, this quote is usually meant to show the importance of logistics. Okay, so why did I bring it up? Because I just want to drive across the point that essentially metaphorically, their stomachs were the most full. They have a huge logistical advantage. Just imagine, now all of us are planning a camp, and I say, how much food is there? And you tell me, Mr. Low, there's more than enough food for 5,000 people for a whole month. Okay, this is a logistical advantage. You just imagine how much the USA has. Okay, so they have this, and they bring it into World War II. Now, this is very similar to what we saw in Europe. Remember, we had things like the Land-Lease Act, okay, the huge numbers of troops that they brought in. It is essentially the same point, okay. But what is the implication, the specific implication for Asia? Okay, these are just American posters. This is Rosie the Riveteer. Okay, she was a figure on many American posters saying getting women to get involved in the workforce. Why do I bring this up? Because obviously when the men go off to war, the women who are entering the workforce, they maintain the same level of production because you have the same number of workers. Okay, so that's important, especially when we compare it to the Japanese later on. Okay, so we have already talked about how they are large industrial power now, but you can have all the factories in the world, but if you don't have people to work them, that's no use. But if you look at the post-Great Depression era, post-Great Depression is 1929. This is only like a bit more than 10 years after the Great Depression. There is a large willing labor base. Why? Because all the unemployed people, okay, more workers, essentially means more production, which then gives you a logistical advantage. Okay? And here, why am I making this point? Because America had many, many willing workers. Why did I say compare to Japan? Because forced labor versus willing labor, which is going to be more effective? Okay? POWs are prisoners of war. So basically, they are captured soldiers or the people of whatever captured territory who are forced to work. Okay. Here also we have the contribution of women to the war effort. Here, women ordnance workers. You can look for it in check the textbook. Okay. So so in America, the women can go and work, but the Japanese women are confined to domesticity. What does it mean? Confined means they're stuck, right? They're kept. Their domesticity means they're kept in the home. Okay. What is the implication? What is the pattern between these 2 points that I am trying to make? Okay. This point and this point, they both lead to the same thing, which is advantage in manpower. And not just an advantage, it is a comparative advantage. Why? Listen. Now, let's say I want to show why is the US strong. I can say they have a lot of manpower. But that doesn't tell me about how they beat Japan. It is because if I say the USA has lots of manpower and they have a lot of willing labor force, and then they say the women are also working, this is manpower. It doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell me why the USA beat Japan. But if you say that Japan, okay, they had no women and they had all the POWs, and therefore this is only the effective amount compared to the USA. I must make a comparison that shows that the USA is far superior in order to come to the conclusion that the USA had an economic advantage, that the advantage was important. Okay, so you must make a comparative point here. Okay, so that sums it up. Okay, now let's talk about American military strength. Now, military strength here, we are talking about specific military victories. Okay, and I have two examples here. One, the Battle of Midway, two, the Battle of Coral Sea. I will talk about it later. But the first thing I want to point out is that the attack of Pearl Harbor did not cripple the Pacific Fleet. Now, the Pacific Fleet is the USA's main defense, or rather the tool to influence the Pacific. Okay, remember, why did the Japanese want to attack Pearl Harbor? They wanted to stop US intervention. Okay, the Japanese wanted to take the whole of Southeast Asia. They knew that the US Pacific Fleet could stop them, so therefore they must remove the Pacific Fleet first. Okay, the key thing about the Pacific Fleet is an aircraft carrier. It is force projection. Okay. However, on that fateful day, on 7th December 1941, as we have talked about before, when the Japanese launched the air raid, the main bulk of the fleet was out at sea, which basically means even though the Japanese did successfully attack Pearl Harbor, they did not destroy what they wanted to do. What is the implication of this? The implication of this is that the US Pacific Fleet could respond, which means that the Japanese did not actually create the time and space that they needed to take the rest of Southeast Asia fast enough. Okay, so that is what we want to look at. That is why it is important. Okay, so every time you give me a fact, you must give me the implication. Okay, so now let's go through the two different battles. Now, as we go through, don't get too caught up in the details. Yes, you must know what's going on, but content must always have a conclusion, and from that conclusion, then you have an application. You must know, what am I using this example for? Okay, what does this example show? That is what you must think about. Okay, now, so what happens in the Battle of the Coral Sea is that Japan is moving southwards, right? They're moving south. They want to launch an attack on Australia. America somehow finds out and they manage to defend the area. Okay, militarily it is a draw. Okay, but what happens is that the Japanese southward advancement towards Australia is halted. So imagine this: the Japanese are coming down and down and down, and here we have the island of Australia. Okay, we have Papua New Guinea here, and then the Americans come back up and up, and then we have the battle over here. Boom. What happens in this battle is that they manage to stop the Japanese advance. The line is drawn, the Japanese do not advance any further. This is why it is important. It shows that the Japanese could not push past. This is where the Allies managed to stop them. Okay, so this is where it is. Okay, in this is essentially the map of the Coral Sea. Okay, so now think about it. Let's think about it. The Japanese have been stopped, but that doesn't mean the Americans have started to win. It's like a tug of war, right? Who is winning? Now there's a stalemate, but now the Battle of Midway, this is, shall we say, the turning point. Okay, the Midway Islands are called the Midway Islands because they are literally the Midway. Later I'll show you the map. Okay, what happens is that the Japanese are trying to advance. Okay, they are trying to gain more territory. Okay, if I want to put it very simply, it is like a like any kind of sport in which space is important. Football, basketball, frisbee. Whoever controls space is in control, right? So the Japanese want to move forward. Okay, what they do is that they launch this huge force, 200 ships, 600 aircraft, 8 aircraft carriers. But what happens is the Americans manage to take them by surprise. And Japan lost 4 of its 8 aircraft carriers. This is 50%. Okay, this is half. And 3/4 of their experienced pilots. Now, this is tremendously important. Let me explain it to you. First, we have a soldier here. His name is Johnny. Now, how long is BMP? The BMT is only 3 months. I can finish training a rifleman maybe 6 to 9 months. It takes about 1 year to train Johnny. Okay. Now, so Johnny takes me 1 year. It's cheap. All I need to do is give him a rifle. All I need to. What does he? Sorry. What does he have? He has a rifle. He has boots. Okay. He's cheap lah. All he needs is some food. Okay, and he's happy. But compared to him, I have Bobby. Now, anybody can be a rifleman. Not everybody can be a pilot. Out of 100 people, maybe 1 person can qualify to be a pilot. Why? Because being a pilot requires you to have certain physical attributes, right? You need to be fit, you cannot be scared of heights, or you need certain coordination to be able to fly a plane, okay? Now, so out of these 100 people who are qualified to be pilots, maybe I have 100 candidates. Out of these 100 candidates, maybe 10 of them will actually become pilots. Why? Because they need to clear pilot OCS, they need to be able to think, they may be able to fly, they must be able to plan, to fight, so on and so forth. Out of these, so basically, I have very, very few pilots already, right? After that, it takes about 2 years to train them. They need a plane. It is very expensive to train pilots. You just imagine the jet fuel. Okay, and here comes the fun part. When Johnny gets shot, maybe he gets shot. Okay, maybe it took him 2 months to recover. But when Bobby gets shot out of the sky, what happens to him? You can't replace him. Johnny goes back into the fight, right? He's just a rifleman. But once you lose an experienced pilot, that's it. You've lost him. Okay? And therefore, you see now, 3/4 of the experienced pilots, this is a huge, because this is a huge tactical loss. They are unable to conduct the fight. Okay? Because a pilot is basically the most valuable human resource. With a pilot, you can fly a plane. With the plane, you can do lots of damage. Okay, it's fast, it's powerful. So now, the point of the Battle of Midway is that the Allies, or specifically the Americans, were able to cripple Japanese capacity. Okay, it is a critical loss for the Japanese. Okay, this is where the Midway Islands are. This is China. This is Southeast Asia. Hawaii, you can see Midway is in between Hawaii and Japan. Okay, so the Japanese wanted to come here, take this. Once they have this, they can go Hawaii, they can go down here. Okay, but they didn't. They lost. Okay. Now, all this. Sorry, previously I can say that the Battle of Midway is also proof of a Japanese loss. But what the point of view that I want you to adopt is that the Americans won Midway. Okay, they were able to defeat the Japanese. That's the point of view that we're going to take. It's not that the Japanese made a mistake, it's that the Americans won. Okay. And finally, the last point we have is that the Americans were able to bomb the Japanese home islands. Okay, if you look at the map, okay, these are the Japanese home islands. Let me highlight them. Okay, Japanese factories are here. The Americans basically flew bombing raids from here. Okay, they had planes that could reach the Japanese islands, whereas Japan were to do that, they had to fly all the way across. Okay, which they can't. They can't. You can't fly across the Pacific, not in 1942. Okay. So what happens is that the Japanese are being attacked. The Americans have this ability to attack factories and cities. Why? Cripples Japanese economy, psychological toll. The Japanese realize that, oh crap, I'm getting bombed. And the Japanese economy, they are slowing down. Oh, sorry. The Japanese war production. Okay. The US attacking the Japanese merchant fleet does the same thing. Japanese merchant fleet here, we are talking about transport, okay, about ships that are moving items for the Japanese Navy. Okay. So when we compare this to the comparison where the Americans are able to attack the Japanese factories, where the American factories themselves are safe from attack, you can see the economic advantage. Okay, let me sum up. Now the important thing is, remember what was the Japanese approach? The Japanese approach is the knockout blow. They thought that they can hit the Americans so hard and so fast that the Americans will not have time to respond. The Japanese themselves knew, if you look at the textbook, they knew they did not have the resources to fight for a war for more than 2 years. But what happens in the long run is that you can't beat the Americans for a very simple reason. Their attitude towards war was total war. Total war, is an attitude which everything is focused on the war. Every single resource, human resource, industrial resource, every single thing. Okay, even their women, even their, I don't know about the children, but every single American resource is turned towards winning World War II. Okay? And remember, they have numbers, right? America is more than 10 times larger than Japan, the larger population, so many natural resources, whereas we know that Japan does not have many natural resources, which is the whole point of why they went out in the first place. Okay, so what does it mean that they can fight a sustained war? They can maintain their military momentum. More importantly, over a sustained period of time. Okay, and this means the mighty American war machine would inevitably outweigh and outlast the overmatched Japanese military. Too many O's in this sentence, but basically my point is that they have greater volume over time. It creates this huge, insurmountable advantage. There is no way that the Japanese can even hope to compete. Furthermore, the Japanese kept losing, or rather the Americans won critical battles that cemented their advantage. Okay, that solidified the American advantage. Okay, and that is why the Americans were at such an advantage during World War II. Okay, so that is where we will stop after this. Now we have looked at why the US was so strong. Now the next thing will be Japan, why you make mistakes. Okay, so remember to read your textbook, then we will go through that. Okay, see you.